Well, it looks like the Fantastic Four's first steps might be a little rough. The first test screening results are in, and supposedly things aren't going well for the Fantastic Four first steps. According to Hollywood scooper Jeff Snyder, the movie got a mixed response. In his newsletter, he said, quote, "My source called it both mid and meh, and not that bad, but not that good either. More concerningly, they said it featured weak character development and bad CGI, though the latter issue will certainly be addressed over the next month." Real quick on that point, it's not unusual for test screenings to include unfinished or completely absent VFX. The main point of a test screening is to check the overall feel and flow of the movie, and they don't need completed VFX for that. Usually. It can be a problem if a scene relies on a digital character and the cut doesn't include any performance or uses people in the mocap suits, because that could take people out of the movie. That said, Marvel movies are known for their VFX crunch times. You'd think Marvel Studios would have learned by now that it's better to give the effects teams time to finish their shots instead of rushing them to get it done in a couple of weeks. A Fantastic Four movie would need to rely heavily on CGI. Everyone knows this, so there's really no excuse to force the teams to wait to the last minute to finish shots. This part of the Marvel formula really does need to change. It's not fair to the audience, and it's not fair to the VFX teams. Snyder also said, quote, "In general, Marvel doesn't do public test screenings unless they're worried. That was the case with Eternals, The Marvels, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and Captain America: Brave New World." If that's true, it doesn't bode well, since all those movies got lackluster reviews from fans and critics. Now, to be fair, it's worth mentioning that Snyder also reported that Warner Bros. Should be worried about the movie Sinners based on test screenings, and that movie got nothing but praise from fans and critics. This is one of the reasons why I don't put much stock in rumors. However, another generally trusted insider, viewer Anon, also reported that the test screenings for Fantastic Four got a mid-response. Quote, "The general reaction I'm hearing is okay, but it's not a big sample size. A couple of people have said the first act's shaky, but it gets better once Galactus shows up. Worth noting, I've heard the film is very unfinished, much more than you'd expect from something coming out in 2 months." That last part is worrying because, depending on the problems with the film, this might not be something that can be fixed in an edit. I would also hope these aren't VFX heavy scenes, because that could potentially mean scrapping what's already been done and starting over. If the film already has tons of incomplete shots and is just 2 months from releasing, that puts an even bigger burden on the VFX teams. Incidentally, the Fantastic Four isn't the only film having problems in paradise. The Superman movie also had a recent round of test screenings that, depending on the sources, either went great or sucked super balls. Let's just say the response was mixed. As a result, supposedly anywhere between 18 to 25 minutes got cut from the film. The insiders vary on the number. The movie now comes in at about 120 minutes, making it the second shortest Superman movie after Superman 4. World of Real's Jordan Rumi explained the reason for the cuts. Quote, "Sources close to the production say the film received a mixed reception at earlier test screenings, triggering a cascade of changes. Gunn's original cut apparently leaned heavier on humor, something the execs weren't entirely sold on. In response, several comedic beats were cut, trimming down the tone and runtime. More intriguingly, one of the film's editors was quietly removed mid-process, leading to a slight reworking of the film's structure. This was somewhat of a tweak and signaled a slight shift in how the story was being presented. Some key sequences were shuffled, and minor scenes were added during recent reshoots." If this is true, then it appears that Warner Bros. Made the same mistake twice. When they rebooted the DC franchise back in 2013, they hired Zack Snyder to direct Man of Steel. He has a very particular directing style that is painfully obvious, and supposedly the execs weren't that hot on his take on Superman, but they let him go in that direction anyway. When the movie didn't perform the way they wanted, instead of reeling him in, they let Snyder continue to make the DCEU darker than a black hole, even though they didn't like what he was doing. And it just kept getting worse from there, until they tried to lean more into humor and ignore Snyder's world building, which is why later DC films mention superheroes being a thing prior to Superman's debut, even though in Man of Steel everyone acts like they've never seen anyone like him before. You'd think they learned their lesson by choosing a director whose style aligns with their vision of the character, but no. Instead, they hired James Gunn to reboot the DC franchise, the guy known for his edgy humor, and now they're surprised, just absolutely shocked that his Superman film is heavy on the humor. This is like inviting hot ones to cater your wedding and being surprised they put hot sauce on everything. It's in their name. What did you think would happen? Warner Brothers hired Gunn to direct The Suicide Squad, The Peacemaker Show, and Creature Commandos. There's this sardonic, tongue-in-cheek tone in all of those, so what did they think he'd do with Superman? Now they're surprised when he shows up with a clip of Krypto beating the shit out of Superman, giving a new meaning to cold as ice. You greenlit The Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. You saw Guardians of the Galaxy. What did you think James Gunn would do? Obviously, his style of humor is not appropriate for Superman, and I can't think of anything he's worked on where that humor wasn't present. Why in the world would you hire him to direct Superman if you didn't want him to do the thing he's known for doing? The whole point of hiring him was to get that humor and the billions of dollars his Guardians of the Galaxy films raked in. You can't complain now that you got exactly what you expected. My question is how the new edit flows. Apparently they did some reshoots, so Gunn could have filled in the gaps left by the cuts. A lot of his humor is, let's say, prolonged, so just trimming the scenes can make it flow better. When I think of that scene with Superman getting Krypto to take him back to the fortress, if you cut out the silliness, the scene works fine, so some of the cuts may be as simple as that. Either way, both the Fantastic Four and Superman might end up being mid-tier films instead of the franchise resets the studios expected. Warner Brothers is definitely in a worse shape since most of the post-Justice League films tanked and were poorly received. However, Disney isn't that better off since most of their recent films and shows haven't been that well received either. Both of them could really use that reset. Unfortunately, it's starting to look like they may not get it. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.